My name is Marina Holloway, 27 years old. The detective's voice was shaking when he called me that morning. Not the kind of shake from too much coffee or a cold office. It was the sound of a man who'd found something that unsettled him deeply. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, "I need you to sit down before we continue this conversation." I was already sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the empty high chair we still hadn't put away. It had been 1 year and 2 days since my 3-month-old son, Jasper, died in his crib. 1 year and 2 days of my sister, Francine, telling anyone who'd listen that God took him because I wasn't meant to be a mother. 1 year and 2 days of my own parents nodding along to her cruelty, pretending it was concern. "Detective Thorne," I said, gripping the mug so tightly I thought it would crack. "What's wrong? Why are you calling about my son?" "The final autopsy results are in," he said quietly. "We had to retest several cases from last year using new equipment." He paused, and I could hear him take a breath that sounded almost like regret. "Your baby didn't die from SIDS, Mrs. Holloway. We found something in his system that shouldn't have been there." My coffee mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the tile floor. Brown liquid spread like blood under my bare feet. "What did you find?" "Diphenhydramine, adult-strength Benadryl, enough to stop his breathing." The room tilted. My perfect baby boy, who'd smiled at me just hours before he died, who'd wrapped his tiny fingers around mine during his last feeding, hadn't just slipped away in his sleep. Someone had poisoned him. Someone had murdered my child. "Who had access to Jasper in his final 48 hours?" the detective asked, gently. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because I already knew the answer would destroy what was left of my family. Francine, my sister, the one who couldn't have children, the one who'd babysat him the night before he died, the same sister who'd stood at his funeral holding our mother's hand, whispering that maybe God knew I wasn't ready for motherhood. I swallowed the sob burning in my throat. "Detective," I said finally, my voice almost calm, "I think I know who killed my baby." When those 2 pink lines appeared on the pregnancy test that October morning, my hands trembled so hard I nearly dropped it. Derek, my husband of 2 years, looked over my shoulder, eyes wide. "Are you sure these things are accurate?" "I took 3, I said, pointing to the counter where 2 more tests lay in a neat damning row. He laughed, a half-disbelieving, half-ecstatic sound, then lifted me off my feet and spun me around in our tiny bathroom. "We're having a baby," he said again and again, as though repetition might make it real. My parents' reaction was different. When I called that evening, my mother didn't say congratulations. She said, "Well, I suppose you'll quit your job now. Babies are expensive, Marina. I hope you've thought this through. You know your father and I can't help financially." "We weren't asking for money," I said softly. "I just wanted to share the news." She sniffed. "Have you told Francine yet?" My stomach tightened. "Not yet. I didn't want to upset her." Francine had been trying to conceive for 3 years. 2 failed IVF rounds, a third just starting. I knew my news would crush her, but news travels fast in our family. That night she called, voice sweet and brittle. "Mom told me, 'Congratulations, little sister. First try, right? Some people have all the luck.'" It didn't feel like luck. It felt like stepping onto holy ground barefoot. The pregnancy passed in a blur of nausea, ultrasounds, and nursery paint. Derek was tender, protective, a little overwhelmed. My coworkers at Riverside Dental threw a baby shower. My mother sent practical advice by text but never showed up. Francine visited once, bringing a small gift bag with a pacifier and lotion. "I'm sure you'll be great," she'd said, tone airy, eyes glassy. I didn't know whether to thank her or apologize. Jasper arrived on December 3rd at 4:47 a.m., 7 pounds, 2 ounces of soft warmth and life. When the nurse placed him on my chest, he blinked up at me as if he'd been waiting his whole existence for that exact moment. Derek cried openly, tracing Jasper's tiny fingers. "He's perfect," he whispered. He was. My parents visited once. My father held Jasper for about 30 seconds before awkwardly handing him back. My mother spent the rest of the visit criticizing. "These blankets are too thin," she said. "Babies need real warmth. I'll send proper ones." She never did. Francine came only once during Jasper's short life. She stood in the nursery doorway watching me rock him. Her gaze moved from the crib to the shelves to my face. "You look exhausted," she said finally. "He still wakes every few hours," I replied with a tired smile. She sighed. Maybe Mom was right. Not everyone's cut out for this. Then she turned and left. Her words lingered in the quiet like smoke you can't fan away. But I was meant for this. Every 2 a.m. feeding became a secret concert, me humming Beatles songs while Jasper's small fingers rested against my wrist. Every diaper change turned into a game. Every squeal, every smile felt like redemption for every cruel thing Francine had ever said. He was what the pediatrician called an easy baby. Rarely cried, slept in gentle stretches, already smiled on purpose. At his 2-month checkup, Dr. Brennan beamed. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up. He's thriving, Mom." I remember that day clearly. Sunlight spilling across the nursery floor, his tiny feet kicking in the air, my world complete. March 15th started like any other Tuesday. Jasper had his morning bottle at 6. I remember the way his blue eyes, Derek's eyes, followed me around the room. I laid him down for his nap at 8:30, kissed his forehead, and went to fold laundry. The monitor's faint static comforted me, like proof that he was there, breathing, alive. At 10, I went to wake him. The house was quiet except for the dishwasher hum. "Good morning, sweet boy," I whispered, stepping to the crib. He didn't move. His chest was still. My heart stopped before his did. "Jasper?" My voice cracked. I touched his skin. It was cold, ice cold. The next few minutes dissolved into panic and screaming. I called 911. I remember counting compressions, my fingers shaking. The operator's voice was calm, distant. 1, 2, 3, 4, breathe. The paramedics came fast, but not fast enough. At the hospital, a doctor with tired eyes told me words that still echo. There was nothing we could do. "SIDS," he said gently. "It's no one's fault." But it felt like mine. 3 days later, at the funeral, I sat with Jasper's stuffed elephant clutched to my chest. My mother's sobs sounded rehearsed. Francine sat beside her, eyes dry, whispering to my aunt, "Maybe it's God's way." Marina was so overwhelmed. Maybe God knew. I froze. My mother's voice joined hers. She was always irresponsible. Remember the goldfish she forgot to feed? I was 8. 8. I sat in that chair, silent, while my family dissected me like I wasn't there, while my baby lay in the ground. 1 year and 2 days later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Mrs. Holloway," said Detective Thorne, "I need to speak with you about your son's case." "My son died of SIDS," I said numbly. "That's what we need to discuss. Can you come to the station?" Derek drove us downtown in silence. The air between us was brittle, fragile. In the detective's cramped office, Thorne opened a thick folder with Jasper's name. "Last month, the state upgraded its testing equipment. As part of validation, we retested several cases, including your son's. We found diphenhydramine, adult strength, at lethal levels." I gripped the edge of my chair. "Are you saying someone poisoned my baby?" He nodded slowly. "This is now a homicide investigation." My breath came shallow. Who had access to Jasper in the last 48 hours? I stared at the folder, unable to look up. "Just us," Derek said quickly. "Marina was home all day. I was home in the evenings." My throat closed. Then the memory hit, sharp and undeniable. "Wait," I whispered. "Francine. She babysat him that night, the night before he died." The room went silent, except for the hum of the fluorescent light above. Derek's face went pale. "She insisted we go to his company dinner," I said. "She said I looked tired. She said we needed a break." Detective Thorne's pen stilled midair. I whispered, "I know who killed my baby." Detective Thorne leaned forward, elbows on his desk, voice steady but low. "Tell me about that night, Mrs. Holloway. Every detail you can remember." I closed my eyes, forcing myself back there, March 14th, the night before my world ended. Francine had called that afternoon, her tone unusually bright. "You and Derek never go anywhere," she'd said. "You both need a break. Let me babysit Jasper, please." I'd hesitated. She'd never offered before. "Are you sure?" "Of course, Jim," she said quickly. "I'd love to spend time with him." She arrived at 5:30 sharp, hair styled perfectly, wearing a floral dress that looked more like she was attending a tea party than babysitting a newborn. "You go have fun," she told me, brushing past me into the nursery. "I've got this." I'd almost stayed home. I remember standing in the doorway, clutching my purse, watching her hum softly over Jasper's crib. He cooed at her. For a moment it looked almost normal, sweet even. Derek touched my shoulder. "You okay?" "I don't know," I said. "She's being nice." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe we should take advantage of it." We left around 6. Dinner was polite, tedious, filled with coworkers I barely knew. We smiled, nodded, made small talk. I texted Francine twice to check in. She replied, "He's fine, sleeping now." When we returned home at 9:30, the house was silent. Francine sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "How was he?" I asked. "Fussy," she said without looking up. "I gave him a bottle around 7 and rocked him to sleep." She stood, grabbed her purse, and kissed Jasper's forehead lightly. "He's out cold. You're lucky. Most babies would have screamed for hours." I remember laughing softly, relieved. "Thanks, Franny." She gave a quick nod. "Anytime." She left without another word. When I checked the crib, Jasper was asleep. So still, so peaceful, his tiny lips parted. I pulled the blanket higher around his chest. I didn't know that was the last time I'd see him alive. Back in the detective's office, I stared at the papers on his desk, feeling the edges blur. "She wouldn't," I whispered. "She couldn't." Thorne wrote something down. "I understand how impossible that feels, but we need to follow the evidence." Derek's voice broke through, hard and low. "You're saying she gave him something? Medicine?" "The levels we found couldn't have been accidental," Thorne said. "This was deliberate administration." "Jesus," Derek muttered, rubbing his temples. "She killed our baby." I shook my head. "No, Francine's jealous, yes, cruel sometimes, but she's not—" "Mrs. Holloway," Thorne interrupted gently, "did she ever say anything that made you uneasy? About you? About Jasper?" The memories came in fragments. Her words, once sharp and mocking, now carried new meanings. "Some people have all the luck. Maybe you weren't meant for this. Not everyone's cut out for motherhood." I swallowed hard. "Yes," I said quietly. "Too many times to count." 2 weeks later, the investigation cracked open like ice under pressure. Detective Thorne called daily, each update more horrific than the last. They'd subpoenaed pharmacy security footage. Francine appeared in 3 different stores in 1 week, each time buying the same over-the-counter medication. Liquid Benadryl. All cash transactions. Then came her search history. Queries about infant dosages, respiratory suppression, how long antihistamines stay in a baby's system. It didn't stop there. Thorne found her journal. When I saw the photocopied pages spread across his desk, I thought I'd faint. Her handwriting, tight, controlled, filled line after line with venomous comparisons. He read aloud, voice measured, professional. March 8th. Marina complained for 20 minutes at Sunday dinner about being tired. I've been tired for 5 years. Tired of doctors, tired of needles, tired of watching her get what I prayed for. Maybe God gave her the baby to test me. I pressed my hands against my stomach, as if holding myself together. Thorne hesitated, then slid another page toward me. "You should see this." March 14th, the day she babysat. "Tonight's the night. Just enough to scare them. Just enough to make him sick so everyone sees she can't take care of him. Maybe a few days in the hospital. Maybe then Mom will finally see I should have been the one to have a baby first." The handwriting faltered mid-sentence. I measured 3 times. I know exactly how much. Not too much. Just enough. I stared at the words until they swam before my eyes. "She planned it," I whispered. "She planned to make him sick." Thorne's voice was soft. "We believe she panicked when he cried more than expected and gave him more than intended. The dose was triple what a newborn could survive." Derek sat beside me, fists clenched on his knees. "She murdered him because he cried?" His voice cracked into a raw whisper. "She confessed partially," Thorne said. "Claims she never meant for him to die. But intent doesn't erase responsibility." The room felt small, airless. "She held him," I said. "She looked at him and gave him poison." No one answered. That night I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the house looked like her. Every creak in the floor sounded like footsteps in Jasper's room. I wandered to the nursery, turned on the nightlight. His crib stood exactly as we'd left it. Soft blue sheets, a mobile of tiny clouds. I sat in the glider and stared at the wall until morning. When the sun rose, the phone rang again. My mother. "What did you tell the police?" she demanded. I closed my eyes. "Mom!" "Francine's been arrested. She called me from the station. She says you accused her of something unthinkable." "She confessed," I said quietly. "That's impossible." "They found receipts, Mom, her journals, search history, everything. She loved that baby." Her voice broke, but it wasn't grief. It was fury. "You're letting them tear our family apart." "She poisoned him." "She lost control," my mother shouted. "After everything she's been through, do you have any idea what infertility does to a woman?" "She researched how to kill my son," I said flatly. "You're sick," she hissed. "You've destroyed this family over some misunderstanding." The line went dead. The next morning, I met Thorne and the prosecutor, Patricia Vance, in a small conference room. Vance was composed, her tone clinical. "We're charging Francine Holloway with second-degree murder." The words hit like glass shattering. Thorne reached across the table, sliding a tissue box toward me. "Mrs. Holloway, this is going to be difficult. Your family may not support the investigation. You need to be prepared for that." I nodded numbly. They already don't. Derek sat beside me, his hand over mine. "We'll see this through," he said. But that night, I watched him from the hallway as he stood in Jasper's room, his hand resting on the crib rail, shoulders trembling. When he turned, his eyes were hollow. "Do you ever wonder," he said quietly, "if she meant to kill him or just to hurt you?" The question lodged in my chest like a shard of glass I couldn't remove. Days passed in a blur of paperwork, interviews, statements. Reporters started calling. My parents stopped answering mine. The house grew quieter, colder. One evening, I found a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was brittle, detached. "Your father and I will not testify against Francine. We believe she's suffered enough." Suffered enough. I deleted the message. Weeks later, I stood outside the courthouse, wind tangling my hair, watching as officers led Francine inside in handcuffs. She glanced up once, saw me across the steps, and stopped walking. For a heartbeat, I thought she'd cry. Instead, she smiled, small, deliberate, almost pitying, as if to say, "You still don't understand." The courtroom smelled faintly of lemon polish and fear. I remember that first day of the trial as vividly as the morning Jasper died, the way the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the way the air conditioning blasted too cold, as if the whole building wanted to freeze time. Francine sat at the defense table wearing beige, her hair pulled back neatly, face pale but expressionless. She looked like a woman attending a meeting, not one accused of murdering her nephew. Her lawyer, a sharp-featured man my parents had hired, leaned toward her, whispering instructions. My parents sat in the second row behind her. My mother clutched a tissue she never used, eyes red but dry. My father's jaw was clenched, his gaze fixed forward. They hadn't spoken to me in weeks. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The scrape of wooden benches sounded like a wave breaking. Prosecutor Patricia Vance began by outlining the evidence: pharmacy receipts, search history, journal entries. She spoke clearly, calmly, her voice slicing through the air like a knife. "This case is not about intention," she said. "It is about responsibility, about a choice made with forethought and malice." Francine's lawyer countered immediately, voice smooth as silk. "This is a tragedy, not a crime. My client was emotionally unstable due to years of failed fertility treatments. Her judgment was clouded by desperation. She never intended harm." I wanted to stand up and scream. She planned it. She measured. She wrote. She acted. But I sat silent, hands clasped so tightly my nails dug into my palms. The first witness was Detective Thorne. He described the investigation step by step, his tone factual, his delivery steady. The photos he displayed made the jurors shift uncomfortably. Jasper's crib, the empty bottle, the lab reports with red underlines marking toxicity levels. Then came the journal pages, the ones I'd already read until they haunted my dreams. Hearing them read aloud was worse. Maybe God made a mistake giving him to her instead of me. The words hung in the courtroom like smoke. Francine didn't flinch. She simply folded her hands in her lap. When it was my turn to testify, I could barely breathe walking to the stand. My knees trembled. Derek squeezed my shoulder before I took my oath. The prosecutor's questions were gentle but precise. "Mrs. Holloway, can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" I stared at Francine. Her eyes met mine without shame, cold and distant. "We were sisters," I said softly. "But she always competed. I didn't realize how much until it was too late." Vance nodded. "Can you tell the court about the night of March 14th? I told them everything, how Francine insisted on babysitting, how she said I looked tired, how she gave Jasper his bottle and rocked him to sleep, how peaceful he looked when we returned. And the next morning, my throat tightened. He didn't wake up. A murmur rippled through the room. Vance placed a photograph on the screen. Jasper's crib bathed in morning light, tiny stuffed elephant resting beside an empty blanket. "Is this the scene you found?" "Yes." "Mrs. Holloway, did you ever give your son Benadryl?" "No," I said, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. "Never." When she finished, Francine's lawyer stood. "Mrs. Holloway," he said smoothly, "you and your husband left your infant son with my client while attending a dinner, correct?" "Yes." "Would you say you were overwhelmed at the time?" I frowned. All new parents are overwhelmed. He smiled slightly. Of course. But you had previously told your sister you were exhausted. You confided in her. I was tired, I said, not negligent. He nodded as if understanding. And after your son's death, you blamed yourself, didn't you? You even said as much to Detective Thorne. I hesitated. Yes. So it's possible, he continued, that your grief has shaped your memory. No, I said firmly. My grief didn't buy 3 bottles of Benadryl or search how to poison an infant. The courtroom went still. Vance's voice cut in, calm but sharp. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge said. But the damage was done. The jurors had heard me. When Derek took the stand, his testimony broke what little composure I had left. He described finding me in the living room performing CPR, how he arrived home to flashing lights and chaos. His voice cracked when he spoke of Jasper's laugh, the way he'd grip his finger. He was everything, Derek said quietly, and she took that from us. Across the room, Francine's shoulders twitched, the smallest flinch, gone in an instant. The trial stretched on for 3 weeks. Each day was another wound reopened. The defense called a fertility specialist to describe the emotional devastation of failed IVF. They tried to paint Francine as a victim of biology, of hormones, of grief-turned-madness. Vance countered by showing the receipts again, the timing too deliberate, too planned. She measured, the prosecutor said. She researched. She wrote it down. I watched the jury as they listened, some with pity, some with horror, one woman dabbing at her eyes. On the final day, I sat in the front row holding Derek's hand while Vance gave her closing argument. This case asks a question that no parent should have to answer, she said. What do you do when the danger isn't a stranger in the dark, but your own sister, smiling across the nursery door? The defense lawyer followed, voice rich with empathy. My client is guilty of love twisted by pain. She lost control. That is not murder. That is tragedy. The jury deliberated for 2 days, 48 hours that felt like years. When they returned, I couldn't breathe. Guilty, the forewoman said, of second-degree murder. My knees nearly buckled. Francine didn't react. The judge sentenced her to 25 years to life. As the bailiffs prepared to escort her out, she turned toward me. No tears, no apology, just that same cold, steady stare. Her lips moved silently. You didn't deserve him. Afterward, reporters swarmed outside. I didn't speak. Derek guided me through the flashing cameras, his arm around me, but I felt detached, like a ghost walking through someone else's story. That night, we sat in silence at the kitchen table, the same spot where the detective had called me months earlier. She'll be in prison for decades, Derek said finally. I nodded. It doesn't feel like justice. He reached across, taking my hand. Then maybe justice isn't what we thought it was. A week later, a letter arrived from my mother. The handwriting I'd known since childhood looked foreign now. Tight, angry strokes. You destroyed our family. Francine was sick, not evil. You could have protected her instead of punishing her. You'll regret this when you're alone. I folded the letter carefully, then set it in the sink and burned it. The ashes curled and vanished. I didn't cry. Not for her, not for them. I'd already buried enough family for one lifetime. It's been 3 years since the verdict. 3 years since Francine's last words burned into me like a scar I stopped trying to hide. Derek and I sold the house in Riverside a month after the trial ended. Every room felt haunted, the nursery most of all. I couldn't stand the silence, the way sunlight fell across the crib, like it still remembered his shape. We packed everything in boxes, drove west without telling anyone, and started over in Colorado Springs. Here, the air is thinner, sharper. The mountains rise like old guardians at the edge of our backyard. In autumn, the aspens turn gold, trembling against the wind. Some mornings, when the fog settles low, the whole world feels suspended, quiet, mercifully empty of voices that once judged me. We bought a modest house with creaking floors and sunlight that spills across the kitchen table every morning. That table, the same one where I once answered a call that shattered me, now holds something new. Bottles, crayons, a small basket of toys. Our daughter, Luna, was born 18 months ago. She has Derek's patience and my stubbornness. When she smiles, she looks so much like Jasper that sometimes it hurts. The same deep blue eyes, the same curious tilt of the head. But her laughter, that's all her own, light and defiant, as if daring grief to find her. I tell myself she's a second chance, but that's not quite true. She's her own story, one I refuse to let be written by fear. My parents haven't met her. They chose their side the day they stood behind Francine in court. They still visit her every week in prison, sending money for her commissary, writing letters about forgiveness and family unity. I stopped opening their envelopes long ago. The last one I read said, "You've turned your back on your sister. She loved that baby. You've made yourself bitter." They call it bitterness. I call it boundaries. Derek's parents, Grace and Robert, moved to Colorado last year. Grace watches Luna while we work, humming lullabies in the kitchen, filling the air with warmth my own mother never managed. Robert built a small swing set in their backyard. He carved Jasper's initials into one side and Luna's on the other. 2 grandchildren, Grace says when neighbors ask. 1 here, 1 in heaven. Sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I hear both names at once. A letter arrived 2 months ago with the prison's return address printed neatly in the corner. I almost threw it away. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at my name written in Francine's cramped handwriting. I opened it. "Marina, I've been in therapy. They tell me to write letters, to take responsibility. I don't expect forgiveness. That would be obscene. But I need you to know that I understand now. I didn't want to hurt him. I wanted him to need me. I wanted everyone to see that I could be a mother too. I was so broken that I broke everything around me. I think about him every day. Would he like dinosaurs or trucks? Would he be shy like you or bold like Derek? I'll never know. I stole that from you, from him, from myself. I'm sorry I took your baby. I'm sorry I took his whole life. I'm sorry I didn't see that my pain wasn't an excuse. It was a weapon. You don't have to write back. I just needed you to know I see it now." The words blurred through my tears. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in Jasper's memory box, alongside his hospital bracelet and the tiny hat he wore home. I didn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I no longer wished her pain. Some wounds just stop bleeding. They never quite heal. A week later, Detective Thorne called. His voice was older, softer. "I wanted you to hear it from me," he said. "I'm retiring next month. Before I do, there's something I thought you'd want to know." I gripped the phone tighter. "What is it?" Because of Jasper's case, the state changed its testing requirements. Every SIDS case now undergoes expanded toxicology with the new equipment. We've uncovered 3 other homicides in the last 2 years that would have gone unnoticed. Your son, his voice broke slightly. Your son saved lives, Mrs. Holloway. Parents are getting answers because of him. I couldn't speak. His death changed things, Thorne said quietly. I thought you should know it meant something. After we hung up, I sat in silence. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like the silence after a scream. It felt like the pause before a prayer. That night, I stood in Luna's doorway watching her sleep, the soft rise and fall of her chest, the rhythmic sighs that filled the dark. I still check her breathing more than I should. Sometimes the fear whispers, what if it happens again? What if you wake to silence? But I've learned not to live inside that whisper. I choose to remember instead the good parts. Jasper's gummy smile, the way he'd grab my finger and hold on tight, as if to remind me I was his whole world, the tiny hiccups after feeding, the warmth of him on my chest. Those memories used to crush me. Now they steady me. He was loved, completely, for every second he was here. Despite what Francine believed, despite what my parents said, I was exactly the mother Jasper needed me to be. Every bottle, every lullaby, every quiet morning proved it. Luna stirs in her crib, making those small, sleepy sounds that mean she'll wake soon. I walk to the kitchen, prepare her bottle, the same way I did for Jasper, measured, careful, steady. As the milk warms, I whisper what has become a promise, one I keep every day. Mommy's here, baby. Mommy will always protect you. This time I know exactly how to keep that promise.